Good afternoon, everybody. It is 4 o'clock on the spot. I think I am going to start this wonderful panel discussion. And I think before I start, I'd like all the panelists to switch on their videos so that everybody can familiarize themselves with the people that are going to be contributing towards this wonderful conversation. As you can see, I am the rose amongst the thorns, but it's going to be quite an exciting and hopefully not too thorny conversation. So my name is Matsi Modise. I'm an entrepreneur, founder of Uraha Africa Holdings. I'm an entrepreneurship activist. I wear various hats in the entrepreneurship development space, but for the purposes of today, I'm the chairperson of the South African Startup Act movement, which has been doing a lot of lobbying and advocating for a startup act or startup reforms in South Africa. So I'm going to be your moderator for this session. And joining me is Brandon Paschal, it's Plotz, and on the panel it says Roger, but it's Graham. And in essence, these are my panelists. I will officially introduce them just now, but just to give a bit of why are we here today. And it's good to see that we have a couple of participants that are joining us, because this is quite an interesting topic. And I'm sure that the people that are joining us today come from different parts of the ecosystem. They come from parts, whether they're entrepreneurs themselves, local entrepreneurs, foreign entrepreneurs, that are wanting to drive change in the country, that are wanting to contribute towards job creation and contributing towards a global economy. And it's quite exciting to see that the world is changing. I was on a panel earlier on today, so it has been quite a long day. And the question on that panel was, why should people invest in South Africa now? And my response to that is that South Africa is ready. South Africa has found its feet. Yes, there are a lot of gaps, there are a lot of loopholes, there are a lot of reasons why people wouldn't want to set up in South Africa. But who wouldn't want to set up in South Africa, besides the beautiful faces that are always happy and smiling, besides the wonderful weather, besides the beautiful scenery that you see if you're living in Cape Town or Johannesburg? It's such a dynamic country. But as entrepreneurs, as startups, as those people that are coming up with ideas, with solutions, we want it to work for us as much as we want it. It needs to work for the country. And the purposes of today's webinar is to unpack the challenges and loopholes of the current South Africa business visa. We're going to discuss how a startup act or amendments to existing policies will address these challenges, and also have other countries been able to improve regulations for business visas. We're very, very fortunate to have a great partnership with the UK-SA Technology, the UK-SA Tech Hub. We have a wonderful partnership with them, and they have enabled this conversation today. And for us, as much as we South Africa, we're a great country, we can always learn from others. We can always learn from others' experiences, because, you know, South Africa's ecosystem is quite young, but it is emerging. As you can see, there are great South African ambassadors that are creating globally relevant businesses, the likes of the Go Ones, the likes of the Sweep South, the likes of the Yokos, you know, globally competitive businesses, but we need more and more of them. And also as a country, we need to attract more and more great talent, more and more people that want to come to South Africa, but not just take from South Africa, who want to contribute towards the country. And in essence, how do we make it easy for them? How do we make it attractive for them? How do we create an enabling environment where there's going to be a value exchange? Because a lot of the models that have gotten the world to what it is today, you know, I can say a lot about where the world is today. All I know is that I don't have electricity at some point during the day. Everybody's complaining about the rising petrol prices. It's insane. So the world is not in a good place, but I think if the world had to shift to an environment where it's a win-win collaboration, not competing, the world would definitely be a better place. So one of the great strides that the South African Startup Act movement has been able to create or to achieve is our ability to co-create as an ecosystem, whether you are an entrepreneur, an investor, an accelerator, incubator, we've come together to create this movement, right? I know, when we say it's a movement, it's quite a serious thing. It's something that's shifting from one place to another. We could say it's an organization, like-minded people coming together. But for us, what resonates is really to say that the Startup Act is a movement. It's a collaboration. And we've been able to get great partners on board, such as the UK SA Tech Hub, such as the World Bank, and the various organizations that sit on our steering committee are wonderful organizations. And this is a movement for the ecosystem. As much as I've outlined and identified few people, it is for us, it is for you, it's for entrepreneurs, it is for high impact, high growth startups by high impact, high growth enablers. And so one of the key challenges that were identified as part of the Startup Act was our inability to attract talent in South Africa, because everybody wants to come to South Africa, but they're finding it very difficult to come in the country. So we do have an existing business visa, but it's a process that is hamstrung by administrative inefficiency. It's very unpredictable. There's lack of clarity in the process system. There's low levels of ease of doing, engaging in that regard. And you find a lot of people now having to come into South Africa, start something, but 3 months later having to now go off somewhere else so that they can come back because their visa has expired. Why should we do that if we have value adding startups that want to come into South Africa? So that's just creating, the landscape of our conversation today. And in essence, it's quite exciting to know that during the last State of the Nation address by our president, he acknowledged that South Africa has not made it easy for talent, has not made it easy for capital to come into the country or to leave the country, for transfer of intellectual property. And he made it very clear, because we've had some interactions with him, that South Africa has to be a startup enabler. It has to be a startup nation, because South Africa is special in many, many ways. So without laboring too much, because there's a lot of questions and answers, there's a lot of dialogue that's going to happen, I'm going to now introduce my panelists, who will then be giving us inputs around their experiences. And then also a particularly special a panelist is Graham Peachey, who's a senior policy advisor, PBS, and economic migration policy for the UK Home Office. And he's going to be able to share with us what are the best practices, because trust me, I'm sure the UK wasn't as switched on as it is today. It had its moments of having to crawl, but now it's running. It's really attracting a lot of local, even South African talent is going to the UK to set up shop because it's easier for them. They've made it very attractive. And then I have two other great panelists. The first one being Plotz, founder of SEON. I mean, Finn is one of my very good friends, and he's always corrected me of how to say it. So he'll pronounce it probably, but he's a founder of SEON, which is a security specialist. And then we also have Brandon Paschal, who's also an entrepreneur from the US, and he is the founder of and consultant of Cadence Lyfe. Gentlemen, you'll have to correct me if I miss and botched up your company names, but I think I'm quite excited to have you all on board today. It's going to be quite an interesting conversation. And so, but before we start, I really want to encourage dialogue. It's not us speaking to you. Yes, of course, we're going to have a setting the scene conversation, but you're more than welcome to ask questions in the chat room. We'll be looking out for those questions. And if you could be very specific, because, no question is a stupid question. You could be going through what a lot of the panelists or the experts on the panel have gone through, and you could avoid that because they've gone through it and they can give you inputs and advice. So we encourage you to be part of this conversation with us. I know it is structured to start now at 4 o'clock. Let's see how far the conversation takes us. I will not keep you longer than I should, but I think this is a very progressive conversation, one of a few series of webinars that we will be running with the UK SA Tech Hub. And today we're particularly talking about the South African business visa and how to improve upon it. So without further ado, I am going to ask our entrepreneurs on the panel, one is from Germany, that being Finn, and the other one is from the US, that being Brandon, to tell us about their entrepreneurial journey in South Africa and what has been their contribution so far. So I'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Matsi. So I'm not new to the country. I've been here 17 years now. And I started out in an NGO helping disadvantaged students at universities in Gauteng figure out how to navigate, jump from school to university and then university to the workplace, because there is a mindset shift that is pretty big to try to bridge for a lot of the country. I then joined a tech company, a software company, that was eventually, after a couple of years, I joined them as the first non-technical hire. And then we sold that company to WPP, which if all of our UK friends here should know who that is. And then I was at the Launch Lab for 6 years here in Stellenbosch, building startups out of university technology. And Matsi, the company you mentioned, Cadence Lyfe, that's really just a freelancing consulting company while I work on whatever the next thing is that I'm going to do. So I have a couple of projects. One is an agri-tech venture builder that's working with some really fancy research that you guys have worked with at TIA, one of your other hats that you wear. But some of the technology that TIA has also supported, I'm helping them commercialize some of that. So yeah, a few different things and hats that I'm wearing, similar to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Brendan. And Finn, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, born and bred in Germany, but I've always had a close connection to South Africa. Half my family lives here. I spent my student exchange year here in Cape Town. And at the end of the day, we're still a German company though. So we founded SEON in 2017 in Hamburg, Germany. But it was very clear from the get-go that South Africa was going to be a brilliant market and destination for us. So for us, it's an interesting combination of having the same company in several countries, which also, and that's today's topic, has a big effect on visa arrangements. So for me personally, I've spent 2 years pretty much full-time in South Africa, and I'm now splitting my time between Germany and South Africa, pretty much 50-50.
Great. And I think just to now enter the subject of today is the current South African business visa. Tell us what's been your experience. Like, explain to me, like I'm a 10-year-old that wants to one day start a business in South Africa. Just tell us what has been your personal experience. And yeah, I think I'll ask further questions from that. But just tell us, and Brandon, I'd also like, after Finn, I'd like for you to share your experience.
It was an interesting experience. And in one way, very good and straightforward. In the other way, also just not as structured as it would need to be. So when we set up the business here in South Africa, we were intending to set it up. Actually, I reached out to the South African embassy in Berlin, and I told them, this is what I'm trying to do. What should I do in terms of my immigration status? And they said, as long as you keep being employed in Germany, you can just rock up at the border and you get a stamp for 90 days every time you do it. And that worked fine, but it also means that I was never able to be in South Africa for more than 90 days at a time. For me, and also for some of my colleagues here that came down from Germany, and lots of sort of like digital nomads that are out and about in the Cape Town tech ecosystem, a majority of them are on those 90-day visas. And while it's nice and straightforward, and we wouldn't necessarily want to have employment contracts in South Africa if we're already employed by holding companies or parent companies elsewhere, it's not really a sustainable setup. So therefore, this idea of having that startup or nomad visa really appeals to me, and at least looking around and asking around here, my colleagues, many of us as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Finn. And by the way, congratulations on your new office, the SEON office in Cape Town. It's a beautiful space from what I've seen. Congratulations on setting that up. Brandon, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, that a little bit on that scenario that Finn just explained. There are loopholes that allow for that, but a proper immigration attorney would be like red flags everywhere, and that the embassy told you that's a whole other conversation. But I think one thing to look at, so there is the allowance for critical skills, which it's actually fairly easy to prove that if you do tick one of those boxes, or you have enough people that will write you letters that you can. I've witnessed one recently where it's like, yeah, we have a lot of accountants and financial skills, but if you just word things in a certain way and have people kind of wax lyrically about your qualifications.
Brandon did say he's experiencing some load shedding, so welcome to South Africa. He might be able to, so he might, his network is a bit challenged. But yeah, I think he makes, both Finn and Brandon make very critical points around there is opportunities, but they're not structured in a way that is ideal. It wastes a lot of time. It wastes a lot of resources. It creates a lot of uncertainty. And if you are wanting to start a business in South Africa, you always want to, or in any jurisdiction, you want to go to an environment that makes it less difficult to start. But we have in essence created a lot of loopholes, the 90-day visa, the 30-day, touristic visa. And as Finn said, there's a lot of digital nomads. But what if we were able to create a framework that allows them, for example, the remote working visa that the president announced, or the startup visa? So we're quite excited, we're quite encouraged. And I think as just a way of introducing Graham into the conversation, who is from the UK, maybe tell us about your organization and what it is that you do. And then you can talk a little bit about your current business visa structure.
Yeah, sure. So I work for a unit called the Points-Based System and Economic Migration Policy Unit. And so essentially we are the people who design the immigration systems. And in my particular role, I'm responsible for looking at the innovator and startup visas that we have within our system. So as you can probably tell from the names, those are our visas that are specifically aimed at people who are looking to move a company lock, stock and barrel, or start up a company in the UK. So we have sort of a dedicated scheme in that space. So my job basically is to make sure that those are working properly and to ensure that they really sort of deliver for the UK economy. During my time, I've been working in this space on and off for about sort of 4 or 5 years now. There's been quite a lot of change over that time in terms of how we approach entrepreneurial migration. So back pre-2019, we had a scheme that was called the Tier 1 Entrepreneur Visa. We also had a scheme called the Tier 1 Graduate Entrepreneur Visa. And so your Graduate Entrepreneur Visa was for people coming out of university who wanted to start up. They got 2 years. That didn't count towards settlement, but gave you quite broad, generous terms to find your feet as an entrepreneur. And then the expectation was you'd move into Tier 1 Entrepreneur, which helped you go to settlement, assuming your business was functioning. The problem we had, Tier 1 Graduate Entrepreneur worked fairly well. Tier 1 Entrepreneur was working less well. Tier 1 Entrepreneur was focused primarily along the lines of, have you got £200,000 to bring to the party to start up your business? Can you pass a fairly we found it quite a difficult process of a genuine entrepreneur test, where you'd basically be assessed by a UKBI immigration caseworker. Does your business look okay? Do you sound genuine? But there weren't really any broader criteria around that. So it was all a bit vague. And what we were finding was there was an awful lot of fairly poor quality businesses that were coming through that scheme. But then on top of that, the feedback broadly was it was pretty bureaucratic, and the evidential requirements for it, particularly when you were trying to demonstrate that you had genuinely founded your business and that you applied for a further grant of leave or for settlement, you get sort of boxes worth of evidence turning up for caseworkers to trawl through, which obviously for the applicant is a real headache, and then for the caseworkers is a headache, and one bit of evidence gets left out and that's your case just rejected on administrative grounds, etc. So that was the system we were sort of trying to overhaul, get to a point where we were getting the good stuff coming through at our end, and making it a lot more simple and straightforward for those people who are bringing proper and serious businesses through. So we founded the Innovator visa scheme for that, which basically brought in our UK entrepreneurial ecosystem to be participants in that assessment process, so that they would get endorsed by people who were leading players in our entrepreneurial ecosystem as being genuine, credible entrepreneurs. And so they'd be your applicants would be talking to people who were native of the the ecosystem of entrepreneurialism and startup. As they spoke the right language, they could get into that technical detail that maybe a generalist immigration caseworker would have a bit of an issue getting their heads around. Tech in particular is not a field for the faint-hearted. So having people who really sort of knew their stuff getting involved in the system has helped us to sort of make sure that by the time people have actually got to us, they've had those iterative conversations with the endorsing body. And what we found was we were able to cut refusals on the basis of genuineness or administrative refusals down from about 40%, and we're now looking at single-digit percentages of rejections. So from that perspective, it's actually been really quite successful. We are still on the journey, but I think tapping into the sort of the skills that we had within our own ecosystem has been really quite helpful and a bit of a game changer in terms of how we approach the system.
No, brilliant. I think, thank you so much for sharing that. A few years ago, I had a friend, I was in London for something or another, and a good friend of mine was saying, Matsi, and he lives in London, but operates globally. He's like, well, Matsi, if you want to build a world-class business, you have to be in London, you have to be in the UK. He literally said that. In my mind, I was like, okay, fine. I'm sure, in terms of the geography of where London is, quite in the center, somewhat, somehow. So it's easy to get from one place to another. It's a hub for connecting. It's a hub for, financial services. So there's a lot of pluses. And I think the UK has done very well in being able to attract talent, especially technology talent. Whilst we wait for Brandon, Finn, maybe I could ask you this question, but it's primarily around, if you had a wish list of, I want to be in South Africa, because I have no doubt that you want to leave. The fact that you established an office down there in Cape Town, and also quite you've really integrated yourself into the culture of our country. What would be the top 3-5 things that we should get right as a country in terms of creating a visa structure that is not going to have you having every 90 days, as long as you're employed in Germany, come into South Africa and then sneak right back and then come back again because you are operating in South Africa. Just give me top 3 to 5 things that if you had a wish list, this is what I'd like for South Africa to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're now living in a time, and particularly in the entrepreneurial community as well, where borders don't really matter that much anymore. Business works across borders. Financing rounds work across borders. We've got staff from, I think, 12 different countries. We've got investors from probably even more countries. And it's all coming together into one organization. And that organization covers multiple entities in multiple countries. And that works in the private sector, but this is not how immigration policy works. Roger made a very good point there earlier around the bureaucratic impact of it all. When you're starting a business, you have to be 120% focused on that business. If you're not, it's like you're not going to work out. And compiling boxes and boxes worth of immigration paperwork might help you with your immigration status, but not with your business. And if the business fails, why immigrate in the first place? For us as right. For me as an entrepreneur, or for us here at SEON, if we were allowed to make a wish list, we'd say, dear South Africa, we're an international company. We want to bring, and we have brought, millions of euros into the country. We want to employ dozens of people, well-paying jobs. But we want to be able to have our key personnel move freely between locations without a massive a load of paperwork and without constantly changing contracts and all of that. That's sort of like the company point of view. My personal point of view, and I'm an absolute believer in the country and very optimistic about it. And I think things are not too bad at the moment, but certainly can be improved further. For me specifically, in that situation whereby I'm overseeing both the South African and the German business, and I have to be sort of in both places at the same time, more or less, being able to make that separation between the place I live and the place I work. Because work these days is no longer bound by a destination or location. It can also be fully remotely, but you physically have to be in a place. That would be a dream come true. And you know, at the end of the day, I mean, we all got to pay taxes in one place or the other. So at the end of the day, half your income is gone anyway. So I don't really care about which revenue service it goes to, as long as they work it out somehow.
Finn, thank you so much. I mean, obviously we'll expand further on those thoughts. And then Brandon, we're happy to have you back. I'm glad your electricity is not playing any more games. So yes, you were telling us about your business visa journey, and in essence also the loopholes that you've been able to identify. Could you just continue on that, please? Yeah,
I think what I was trying to finish saying, I kept talking, but you guys couldn't hear me. The critical skills versus the work permit. So there's a list of critical skills, and like some of those, they often get quite outdated and they just plonk new things in there. And then what is that even? But then just a general work permit. And if Finn wants to hire someone, if I want to hire someone from outside that holds my company culture and they don't fit the critical skills, I either need to lie and commit immigration fraud, or find someone locally that does that, but they're all snatched up. The good people are typically in certain positions snatched up by big corporates that pay them a fat salary. And there's even something in the work permit where you, in the current way it's done, where you have to show that you're not underpaying someone just because they're for it. Now that's set up for a Zimbabwean construction worker to come in and not take a job from a South African at the mass kind of level that needs that job to feed their family. But it's applied across the board, where a really cheap job in our circumstance might be, so I've heard of a venture capital partner earning 60,000 Rand a month because they're working for the carry. That same job in Germany is 3 times that at least for the same position, and probably actually more than 3 times that. So you can't get the same talent for the same price, but there's so many foreign people that want to come and help build our economy and our ecosystem that are willing to take a ridiculous pay cut like that because they want to be part of building an economy and building a nation. And they're like, Europe's boring and the weather's really crap. So come here and do some exciting stuff. And I haven't been bored in 17 years. But there's that funny, there's different skills and different jobs. It doesn't mean that the person has more or less value at a human perspective, but there is an economic value that different jobs do bring. And that's why they have a different pay scale for different jobs. And we have to acknowledge that also in the legislation, that not all jobs are equal, not all employees are equal, and make an allowance for the high skilled person that could earn something else and they're not being exploited. They're actually being voluntarily paid less than they could be.
Brandon, those are amazing points. And I think one of the things that I pick up is South Africa has everything to offer, like literally value for money, value for, I mean, if you had to look at the property prices, you know, if you're earning in dollars or earning in euros, coming to South Africa, you know, the quality of life is great. And so we have a lot to offer as a country over and above creating that conducive environment, but it's also a function of how are we packaging ourselves? Because right now, we're not necessarily, like from what Graham was saying earlier on, was making reference to the different kinds of visas. You know, there is I think it's a student entrepreneur visa. So there's just different subsets of different visas. There's a technology visa. So they've packaged it well. And people would rather go to London because, there are a lot of people that are leaving South Africa, high profiled, entrepreneurs and our local talent. And some of the Yoko guys, which is one of the big South African companies, are living in the UK. I think they tried something in the Netherlands, which didn't really work out much. And now they're in the UK. But, London and the UK has the most miserable weather. Not some of the friendliest people I've met in the world. So South Africa really, really has a lot to offer. And I think, Graham, on that is, how have you guys, made it attractive? Is it one visa, 2 visas for the price of one, or how have you guys done it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, as I say, I think it is probably fair to say that the visa offer only gets you part of the way there anyway. I mean, as you say, you always want to play to your country's strengths, and London in particular has a lot of things going for it in terms of, it has this huge history as a major financial centre and things. So once you develop that centre of mass, I think actually you end up with the cards stacked quite nicely in your favour somewhere. So it is, I think, looking at what your country has to sell itself with, and yeah, play up to them. Why not? But yeah, I mean, in terms of the visa offer, I think obviously the innovator visa is important in that gets you your founders, but we do also have then the wider package of things like we're bringing in global business mobility visas for helping people to move their top talent around. I think Finn's mentioned a bit about how do you get your talent to be able to move flexibly around around the world. We've got a very competitive offer within our wider skilled worker scheme as well, that has quick turnarounds on visa application as well, actually, compared to many of our competitor countries. So in terms of being able to sort of fall back on a wider system for making it an attractive place to be, I think we have quite a good overall package for people who are looking to create businesses. I think some of the other stuff that we've got that I think is really helpful for people. Again, Finn, you mentioned it's very difficult as a founder. Why create boxes and boxes of evidence if your business is going to fail in the early stages? One of the things we were very conscious of when we designed the Innovator Visa was making it a system that didn't force you to pick a winner all the time, as it were, but to pick people who are capable of delivering a product ultimately. So we have what's called a monitoring system built into this, where the endorsing body checks in with the entrepreneur 6, 12, 24 months through their process to make sure they're executing their business plan. But one of the things we have built into that in terms of flexibility is they can still continue to endorse you even if your original business has failed, as long as you are putting forward a viable proposition for what you're pivoting to next, accepting that quite a lot of early stage startups will fail, not because the people designing it are bad or they have a stupid plan, but that's life. Until stuff's been thrown against the wall, sometimes it's hard to know how it's going to shake out. So having that little bit of flexibility in there. In the old system under Tier Entrepreneur, no chance. If you didn't hit the requirements, you were going to be out the door. So building that bit of flexibility in there, I think it really sort of addresses that kind of nature of what entrepreneurialism is. And by setting it up, we've got 3 criteria that you have to hit with any business proposition that you're putting it up. So it needs to be innovative, it needs to be viable, it needs to be scalable. And by having that as your set of criteria, you're automatically cutting out all the sort of, I tried to do the high tech thing. Now can I set up my 7-Eleven or my taxi rank? You can't have any of that silliness going on. They still have to be about bringing something that's genuinely going to be the kind of stuff that you want to see. And that's, as I said, that sort of innovative, viable, scalable criteria actually is really important, because the biggest thing that can really screw up your immigration system and make it difficult to be flexible with entrepreneurs is the sheer volume of how should we say, overly optimistic applications of people who haven't really thought stuff through, or they are looking to set up very low rent businesses, stuff that's not really what you want there, and you want to get that noise as much away from the system as you can, because that way you can concentrate on really catering for your quality stuff that you really do want here, and making the system as smooth for them as you can. We actually found when we first launched the innovative visa scheme, our endorsing bodies were all very surprised because they were all from the startup tech system. Now, we've got these thousands and thousands a day of applications of just utter rubbish. Will you support my 7-Eleven, my corner shop, we're not interested. Where's the good stuff? And they were getting the good stuff, but it was a fraction of what was coming through. And we had to sort of say to people, you're going to need to think about triaging businesses as they come through, having some very simple sort of systems to filter it out. And because they are off the entrepreneurial system, they did get their heads around it. They did come up with ways of making sure that they were screening stuff to get to what they actually wanted, and they'd each create criteria for what it was they wanted to be seeing. So your medical tech people would have a sort of thing of send us your medical tech businesses, but this is what we're going to expect to see from you. And gradually what we've seen is by sticking to our guns and by making it quite clear what our expectations are, we've seen that initial wave of people thinking, this will be super easy, I can get whatever rubbish through. That's all started to drop away, and we've now been able to get to a situation where actually it's much more high quality versus rubbish on average that's hitting the endorsing bodies, which means that what's coming through to us is equally much better. And so we've been able to sort of have that system build up that now is a much better place than where it was under Till Entrepreneur.
Great. I would encourage our other people that are on the call to ask some questions, but I think Maria, you had a question. I'm happy for you to ask and be specific who you're addressing it to. If you do have a question, I just saw a hand go up earlier on, but if anybody else also wants to use this opportunity to ask questions, please feel free to do that. You could do it in the form of shooting a message in the chat box, or you could, put your hand up and we'll be able to get you to ask that question. So, so in the absence of that, and I will be looking out. Yes.
Maria was just...
Maria, if you want to make a point, otherwise I've got one.
Sure.
Point.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I think what's quite interesting here would be also to separate between a visa for employment and a visa for residence with remote work. I think the visa for employment is a bit more difficult as you are taking up a local job, which might otherwise have gone to a South African citizen.
Yeah.
The key thing here is, and Brent, you mentioned earlier, an example of the venture capital partner who might earn 3 or 4 times her salary abroad as she might in South Africa. Let that person work remotely, take that 180, 240,000 Rand in, but spend it in South Africa. Spend it on goods and services here. That will do so much more for the economy than just letting a person go away. We've got that massive benefit that everybody wants to live in South Africa because the quality of life is amazing here, as combined. But if we can get those people to live here but work remotely, not taking jobs away or out of the country, that'll be a massive win for everybody.
No, that's a very, very valid point. There is a distinction. Maria, you're about to ask a question.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, so you don't have a question.
Oh, I was going to ask, in South Africa, are they still having those riots and stuff going on? Like all the there's a lot of unrest. I wonder if you guys are okay over there.
Perfectly fine.
Maria, where are you from? Or which planet are you from? That was so last year.
I'm from America. I just thought Finn Plotz was, he's the one that actually brought me here. I thought, he's a very good looking guy, and I was interested in seeing what he had to say.
Okay, we will take that. We'll take one for Finn. Thanks, Maria. Thank you very much for the question and the compliment for Finn.
Thank you. I mean, the safety situation is worth considering when it comes to relocating to any foreign country other than your birth country. And I can safely say that while you do have to think once or twice more often about how to stay safe if you live in South Africa, having been here on and off for the last 5 years, I've not had any bad experiences. And I really say, as long as you're safety wise, you will have a perfect time down here in South Africa.
Thanks for that, Maria. I'm glad you were able to gather that we are safe in South Africa. There are incidences, people can at times be, targets of criminal activity, but it happens anywhere in the world. It happens in the US, it happens in Germany, it also happens in South Africa. So I have Buyani Ngobo. Buyani, could you ask your question, please? Buyani, your hand is up. I don't know if you want to ask a question. You are still on mute.
Yes, I was trying to unmute. I was trying to unmute myself.
No problem.
All right. So hello everyone. I've been following this UK, I think since last year. So I wanted to know, because I've also have two startups. Since it's a startup UK, and I've also attended. I think it was early this year, if I'm not mistaken. There was a competition that was going on. So we have two companies, it's EduTech and the other one is ICT. So there's how do you to fit in terms of want to participate, and also because I can see you are helping startups and I'm one of those startups. So how do you help us? I'm in South Africa, Pretoria. So how do you help us? What's the process we should follow? I think.
Buyani, who's our question for? Is it to Graham?
No, I'm just asking for these guys, because I was checking also the brand, and also that they do help in terms of the startups. What kind of startups is like? I'm in technology myself, so themselves they are helping in terms of startups business. So how can they help me? Any one of them can be Brandon and can be Finn. Yeah, so it's like, because I'm also part of the startup, so I want help in terms of what advice they can give it to me so that I can do the right thing. Thank you.
And I think also, Graham, you could chip into that, because it's besides having an enabling visa or creative visa environment, what else can you do? And also it's probably part of why it's attractive to go to the UK. What else can you do, or are you doing for South African technology entrepreneurs that have the intention to scale their businesses and tap into global networks? Yeah, I think this question is more for Graham, but I mean, Finn and Brandon, feel free to also chip in.
Yeah, sure. So for specifically the scaling up element, actually, that's it's very prescient, as we're currently looking at creating a new provision for scaling up businesses to essentially allow them to more easily access overseas talent when they are entering that high growth stage, as a sort of an early stage business that's going through the sort of the scale up experience, and that's all sort of still being finalized, I think. But it should that's definitely something that we've got in mind at the moment, is how do you support a business through its full growth phase. So in our plan for growth, we are looking at some new scale up provisions. I think again that speaks to stuff like the global business mobility scheme that we're bringing through, and our skilled worker offer. It's just to make sure that if you are a CEO of a startup coming to the UK, you're looking at what's the toolbox that you've got for developing your company. Just making sure that those tools are there, basically. It is a bit of a difficult one in terms of those balancing act from a state perspective with this. So you want to scale up to be coming to the UK to hire British people if you're Britain, because that gets your domestic nationals employed. Good things for your domestic society. The more easy you make it to hire international talent, you just need to balance that against the fact that you don't want to be undercutting your domestic labour workforce, and so there's always going to be a little bit of tension, a little bit of trade-off when you're designing policy around that, to make sure that you get it both right for the entrepreneur, but also you are actually putting a little bit of tension in there to encourage the entrepreneur to do something for you as the country, to use your visa system to encourage behaviours that do deliver for society. So in that sense, we always have to be a little bit of a killjoy in terms of, give us everything we would like in terms of being able to hire whoever from wherever. It's kind of like, well, we quite like if you hired some people from here as well, please. So there's that bit of attention going on in the policy making. But yeah, broadly speaking, we've got a pretty generous toolbox. I think what you can always expect as an entrepreneur as well, though, is you are likely to find that the visa offer for bringing talent to the country will be always in favour of bringing the most skilled, most talented people to that country. The value add, the sorts of people who will pay lots of tax and bring lots of skills that maybe you don't have domestically. So the more that your business is focused on being able to capitalise on that kind of talent and bring those kind of advantages to the marketplace, the easier you are likely to find it, and the more offer within the visa system you're likely to find, whether that's, let's say, global business mobility, skilled worker, but also things like global talent as well that we've got in the UK as well.
Great. I have a question from Suman Moodley. Suman, I don't want to read your question. So if you are not shy enough to ask the question to the panelists, I'm happy for you to do that. But if you are a bit shy, I'm happy to read it. But would you like to ask your question?
Hi, thank you, Matsi. I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks everyone for a very engaging conversation. Timing is apt, something I was looking at literally in the last 7 days. My question is twofold and free for many to answer, but maybe directed towards Graham. Firstly, is there fundamental differences between the innovator and the startup visa from a UK perspective? And secondly, maybe a bit more of a humorous question, but we know that there's a term called SAFERs in the UK, and it's been bandied around quite a lot, but there's endorsing bodies that actually facilitate either you in an incubator or help you through the startup process to help your business succeed over the period with mentorship, maybe a few other inputs during the life cycle. Are there any bodies that you would recommend or that are maybe keen and you've seen some traction on helping South Africans maybe in the last 18 months?
Sure, okay, yeah. So on the first one, fundamental difference between innovator and startup, so when we first launched the innovator startup offer, the concept was very much that startup would be for people who were very early doors. Maybe this was the first time they'd ever sort of done a startup, finding their feet. So it was very much the replacement of tier one graduate entrepreneur. The key sort of difference there. So again, like with tier one graduate entrepreneur, you couldn't qualify those years towards settlement. So in that sense, it was less generous, but equally you were able to work for a certain amount of time outside of your visa. So if you are that early stage person, maybe you've just finished your university course and you're looking to spin out or something like that, but you can't quite afford to do it without sort of a bit of income from somewhere, then you had that little bit of extra support to keep yourself going. The innovator scheme, by contrast, is really for people who are that bit further advanced. Maybe they've come through startup, or maybe this isn't their first go round the founder game, and they know what they're about. Maybe they've got funding from some fairly serious players, or indeed maybe they're quite wealthy people in the first place, so they don't need to go out and find funding. But they should be able to hit the ground running and develop their business at pace, and really be sort of focused on getting through to the success criteria that we've got for innovator to settle. So creating jobs, creating R&D, research and development, and filing patents, and all that sort of good stuff. So really the question mark you need to be asking yourself and thinking, am I going innovator, am I going startup, is broadly, how much of a sort of sophisticated player am I? How far along is my business plan? And indeed, how capable am I to hit the ground running? Or do I need to start a little bit further back in the process and go through startup first for the first couple of years? So that's broadly where we're at with that. In terms of your second question, who should I go with? So yeah, there's loads of incubators and accelerators within the scheme. I'd be hesitant to recommend any one over the other. Really, it depends very much on what it is you're planning to do and where you're planning to do it. So it's less about where you're coming from, I would suggest, and more about where you're going to. So some of our incubators and accelerators, for example, are quite regionally focused. Some are national, but some of them are focused on whether it's London, whether it's Manchester, Birmingham. We've got various different entities where I'll have, you know, their incubator space. So I would suggest that, yeah, think about it more from a perspective of where is it that you want to go and why do you want to go there, and then pick who it is you want as your endorsing body, because obviously there's no point going for somebody who specialises in the Manchester ecosystem and then basing yourself in London. You're not going to get the experience that you perhaps would like if you take that approach, and indeed they're likely to be less interested in you as well if there's not that obvious match up to who they are and what they're about. And again, some of our endorsing bodies all have sort of different sectors that they're interested in. So again, more than nationality, they'll be more interested in, you know, are you doing med tech? Are you doing web tech? Are you doing something with sort of agri tech or anything like that? So they've all got different sort of profiles in terms of what they're really looking to see. So it is a bit of a case of have a bit of a look around, really. In some respects, almost one of the difficulties we've had with the scheme is that there's to a certain extent too much choice. You know, there's a lot of endorsing bodies, and so picking the right one can be a bit confusing. But at the same time, there are some advantages to that. In that, you know, the more choice you've got, the better chance there is that if you take the time to really dig into who's out there, you can find the right fit for you. Brandon, were you going to come in on that?
Yeah, just so as you're talking, there's a similar thing in several EU countries. I know France has the French tech ticket, and like a barrier we have with most government agencies, present company excluded, because Matsi, I'll touch on what Tia does in a second, but most government agencies need to control all the process. And most of the people controlling the process have never worked in the participants in the process they're controlling. So like that already throws up barriers to this whole, no, immigration, it must go through Home Affairs and it must go to VFS, and you must wait for 6 months to get your, even a spousal visa. I just got mine today, my renewal of my spousal visa with my work endorsement, after submitting it in April last year. And there is a precedent where, there's legal precedent where I can continue to work as it's submitted because my wife has the right to keep me in the country. But like that's stupid. How it takes so long for silly things when I'm creating jobs in the tech ecosystem. And so you mentioned the, what was it? Those bodies that can give out the thing. In France, it's the same. In the Netherlands, in Belgium, it's the same kind of thing. And what TIA does really well, Matsi, is you have the TIA Seed Fund partnerships. So nearly every university that I'm aware of has their own TIA Seed Fund to invest in research that they're generating. And that's worked extremely well where I've seen it work. And I've been in, you know, working with tech transfer offices around the country for several years now, and it's used really well. And it's money. And I don't, maybe call me silly, I almost feel like spending government money, there should be a higher risk profile to that given recent history than there is to letting people that want to work come in and contribute to the economy in this kind of level that we're talking about. So then like these agencies and incubators, accelerators, venture capital funds that want to hire people, and we can't find the talent here, even a critical skills visa, unless you get it in your home country, you have to wait a year if you're going to do it here, if you're renewing something or moving from one to another. And so it shouldn't take that long to have that done. So like, is there a way to bypass the VFS system to where you have trusted, audited, accredited players out there like Savka and their member funds? I see Tanya's on the call too. Where I was at the launch lab, and local South African companies, they want to work with local companies, but they also, there's this like anything from Europe and America must be the best thing in the world, even though it might not always be, but they want to procure from outside the border, and we let them do that. But then they need to come here, they need to set up shop because it takes 6 months to get a project off the ground, oftentimes with more complex things that you're implementing. But then they can't come and do it here, and you might need to work with them in their home office. So incubators, accelerators that want to receive from other countries, other African countries, like make that a 6 or 12 month thing, not a 3 month thing, and let them come and work with an accredited and properly reported a launch lab or a founder's factory or a grindstone accelerator, something like that, where you have them acting as the agents that have the delegated authority from Home Affairs to actually give out that visa. And if they botch it up, then remove that right, and everyone they've given it to also loses their right to stay in the country and work.
No, you're highlighting some interesting issues there, that as much as we want talent to come in, it has to be the right kind of talent. It has to be a value-adding talent that's not just extracting from South Africa. So this is obviously not a very simple thing to do, but there are basics that we have spoken about. Remove the clutter. Don't make it too difficult. And
obey our laws.
And obey our laws. And I think I will allow Eloise and Simone to ask their questions, but Ayanda from Dialer Legal Assistant also asks a very pertinent question around, as much as we want to remove the clutter and to create less of the loopholes, how will relaxing some of these red tape perhaps create opportunity for exploitation of the system? I thought that's, as much as we're removing all these things so that it's easier, how are we making this, how can we ensure that it's also not a system that can be abused and exploited? And I think, Brandon, you spoke a lot to that. I don't know if you guys wanted to add more around how can what we're trying to create be exploited. Finn, do you want to, add something there?
In startups, they say hire and fire fast.
yeah.
And I mean, let's be lean here. If someone wants to come into the country and wants to contribute, then let them in, let them try. And if they don't live up to that promise, there's the door.
Yeah,
good one. It's a good one.
We certainly hear that a lot as well in the UK. I mean, I think it is a good idea to make sure that your system up front is reasonably robust. And the reason I say that is, whilst that's definitely one can see the appeal from startup space, having done my time as a border force officer, crikey, it's hard getting rid of people when they run away. And turns out what they said they were going to do was not what they were going to do. That's expensive for the state and the taxpayer. And sadly, people don't always play by the rules. They don't always get the message when you say, guys, you're not doing what you said you're going to do here. So in terms of safeguarding your enforcement and mitigation budget, there's always going to be a few incentives there for the system to be a bit more robust than many in the ecosystem would like. I think from my perspective, the sorts of ways you get there is by making sure that your expectations are clear as a government as to this is the threshold that we're looking for, and holding your endorsing bodies to account to that threshold, and just reinforcing and emphasizing, there does need to be some clear skills, innovation, viability, scalability are the sort of three pillars that we've really held to. Can you show that the business you're endorsing is going to do those things, and that there is a plan in place to do that? People will try and abuse your system. So we see a lot of stuff going on in terms of people trying to offer their services to write random people a business plan that they think will hit the threshold. And so they will then give them that business plan, maybe a script to use against it. And, they'll try and essentially present themselves as a viable tech entrepreneur, and actually it'll turn out that they haven't written their own business plan, and they've got nothing doing. So one of the nice things about having expert endorsing bodies is 9 times out of 10 you give that a good poke as an expert and it will fall over, and so we have seen sort of a reduction in that kind of silliness going on. But equally, endorsing bodies aren't police officers or indeed immigration officers, so they aren't necessarily as cynical a bunch as we are. And sadly, sometimes our cynicism is proved altogether quite correct. So there is always going to be a place, I think, for a immigration officer in the system to just sometimes go, oh, do you know what? Actually, that's a bit dodgy. And one of the things you do see quite a lot of, if you've got multiple endorsing bodies, people will try and shop the system. So they'll take their rubbish plagiarized business plan or whatever. They'll go around all your different endorsing bodies on the off chance that one of them misses the fact they plagiarized the business plan. And one of the advantages that we've got is sometimes we will see that abuse in aggregate And so we can step in and say, actually, guys, you've got that one wrong. We know you've got that one wrong because we've seen this guy three other times trying to come through on different endorsing bodies or through different immigration schemes. We need to do something about that. And the abuse can be quite sophisticated. So legal firms will sometimes be quite happy to do some fairly shady things. You know, so don't underestimate the amount of resource that can get thrown at trying to cheat your system. There's some quite sensible money to be made there if you can work out a system for scamming it. So yeah, I would certainly say just make sure that you are building in some safeguards when you're doing this kind of thing and thinking about how you will spot that abuse through the endorsing bodies.
Great. Yes, Finn, you wanted to chip in there? Oh, you muted. Sorry, Jimmy, can you unmute our panelist?
Yeah, fully on board there, Graham. The difficult thing is whenever you talk about getting people in the country that you want to have in the country, you also have to talk about how to keep people out of the country that you don't want to have in the country. I mean, it's always about striking that balance. But what I really love about that idea of the startup visa or digital nomad visa, whatever you want to call it, as it's also being pushed by the Western Cape government, is that you're targeting a really low risk group of immigrants, because you're targeting people that already have financial stability and an overseas income that don't necessarily need, or in that case would not need, to take out employment in South Africa. You're just taking people in to have them spend their money here. And under that pretext, what does South Africa have to lose? You can exclude these people from social benefits. If they lose their job overseas, they're not allowed to take out employment in the country. So either they find another job overseas where they do have either residency, citizenship, or work permit, or they have to leave.
Great. I think I'm going to try and manage time. There's two more questions. Eloise, do you mind asking your question? It's one of those where it will be difficult for me to paraphrase, but then Simone, I'm happy to paraphrase yours and just to provide some insights around the startup acts that you're seeing across the continent. But Eloise, if you're not too shy, would you mind asking your question? See how our panelists can assist you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for a great chat. I think I may be segueing the conversation here because I can see the efforts are more towards inward missions and I'm looking at more outward missions. And I think Finn raised this about how do you pay tax in two different areas and how do you make it helpful for South African to be, how can I say, working essentially abroad, but living in South Africa, but also allow for remote access to other countries. I don't know if that makes sense at all. Like if I would want to go work in a different area, but still pay tax here or still support this area because this is where you are living. You're not relocating to a different area. I can hear that sounds very confusing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
A little bit confusing, but like you said, it's more of how are we bringing people in and making it attractive versus, now, you going to the UK. That's not a conversation for today.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I think it's great just to understand the dynamics and what you guys are thinking about as well, just to understand more around this topic. So thanks for having a great discussion.
Brilliant. No, we appreciate your inputs, Eloise. And I think as we wrap up, Simone is asking a very interesting question around seeing a lot of startup acts that are being launched in Africa. I think Africa's time is now, as corny or as cliched as it sounds. We are finding our feet as a continent. We are clearly defining our value proposition as what do we have to offer the world versus what is the world feeding us all the time. And also in essence, we are at a point where it's a new generation of Africans that are, globally connected. I mean, Finn and I are friends for many, many years. And, Finn is quite an astute entrepreneur. When I met him for the first time, I was taken aback. I was like, wow, what an impressive young man. I mean, Finn is only, 26, hey? But he's got a global business. So, the world is becoming smaller and South Africa is also waking up to its full potential, as so the rest of the continent. So the Startup Act movement, or all these countries that are creating Startup Acts, is how do we create enabling policy environments that will allow for this growth? And how do we create environments that will make Africans and what they have to offer in terms of ventures and what they have to offer in terms of countries more attractive? So that is in essence what the startups are about. And yes, it definitely goes beyond the business visa, Simone. So in South Africa, we realize that there are a lot of legislations that already exist. So we can't necessarily say we're going to now override everything that's there and recreate a whole new Startup Act. That'll be very difficult. But we acknowledge that there is something called a business visa, but it's currently not working. It has a lot of loopholes. It has a lot of gaps. But let's engage the government, the South African government, and say, hey, there is this whole movement of startups, coming out of South Africa, wanting to go into the world, or globally wanting to come into South Africa, because now we're not competing, we're collaborating, but we've made it very, very difficult. So in essence, the whole startup thing is going just beyond the business visa, but there's various other recommendations beyond the business visa. But we are seeing that the government is now listening in and saying, okay, great, we've got a business visa, but let's look at having a visa for startups. So let's look at having a startup visa. Let's look at having a remote working visa. And other things besides just the business visa component is funding. How do we make funding into South Africa and out of South Africa easy? How do we make ourselves attractive in that regard? How do we make South Africa attractive in how we are treating intellectual property? Because South Africa, unlike a lot of countries, have exchange control, which makes it very lengthy, very expensive for international investors to want to invest in locally founded intellectual property. That's why people would then go to Delaware, they would go to the UK and register their intellectual property. So there's a whole lot of policy-related issues that we need to deal with. And in essence, that's what the Startup Acts are looking at and saying, startups are not, moms and pop coffee shops. They're not manufacturing companies that, are not necessarily utilizing technology. They're not investing in research and development. Startups are dynamic. They're high impact, high growth, and they are scaling. They're really rapidly scaling. So how do we create, or how do we reform the policy that we have to enable us to, have these startups thrive and stay in South Africa and grow in South Africa, and not even stay, because our entrepreneurs have alluded that they want the flexibility of moving because they're global, they're globally inclined. But we wouldn't mind you guys bringing your tax base here. We wouldn't mind you guys creating a lot of jobs. We wouldn't mind you guys contributing towards our economy. But currently we have made it very difficult for them to do that. So that's kind of me trying to answer the question, Simone. I don't know if other panelists would, take a stab at, what else beyond a startup visa is being done or should be done to create an enabling environment for startups on the continent. And then, Simone, if I haven't also properly, authentically captured your question, you're more than welcome to tap in, to chip in as well.
I know you guys at SiMODiSA are doing lots of different initiatives, and the immigration thing has been high on the list for a while, and we're gaining a lot of momentum now. But even like today, I get an email from my bank that says you've reached your exchange control limit. I have an email address with Google. I have a GoDaddy domain and a Wix website, and now I've reached my exchange control threshold. So I have to fill out some form to get permission to spend $30 just to have the basics to run my business. Otherwise, I can't spend any more money to run my business. The exchange control thing, and that's like the micro. I had a startup 4 years ago that raised $2 million from the US. It was sitting somewhere in the wiring system for 6 weeks, waiting for the money to land. They could have closed their doors. They could have laid off their whole team in that time, just for whatever processes to get through to make sure that the money landed. 6 weeks, like, do the control, make sure it's not fraudulent, but 6 weeks is a little ridiculous.
And the whole exchange control thing is a complete clusterfuck for startups. And you have to be just direct about it. I mean, how ridiculous is it that we've got South African investors investing into a South African portion of our business, but doing it in Germany? because they don't want their money in South Africa, because they can never get it out again. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, getting it in the first place, I mean, that's even worse and even less sensible. I mean, who would invest in a South African business if, in the best case of it being a fantastic exit, they can't get their cash back, they can't reinvest it in another country? So
Finn, that's what my life and my job is so exciting, because that's a topic for another day. Definitely we're going to have a topic on IP exchange control and unpacking that. Simone, did you want to add on to the question? Are you covered around the whole Startup Act movement? Dumi is going to post in the WhatsApp, sorry, the chat room, the Startup Act website, whereby you get all the information around, you know, the position paper and what's happening, the conversations we'll be having, the partnerships that we've been able to garner, you know, with the UK SA Hub and then Tech Hub, and then also with the likes of the World Bank. So please just be part of the movement, have your voice being heard, because in essence, things are shifting. I mean, Brandon, you know that I've been singing the same song since 2014, right? When SiMODiSA started. And only now in 2022, do we get the president to really say, hi, we see you startups, we understand you're very different, you're very unique, you know, there's a lot of innovation, you are really going to make us proud, let's do something about it. But it has been the same conversation. We've written white papers around the challenges. I think I'm going to address the last question from Yasmin, talking about triple BEE. It's an interesting one. It's a very touchy topic. In fact, it's one of the recommendations, Yasmin, that we did put in the Startup Act position paper around. Yes, triple BEE is very important in South Africa, guys. We cannot take away from its importance, that transformation, you know, integrating previously that people that have not necessarily been part of the economy into the economy, and paving the way for them in a form of, you know, the triple BEE legislation. It's so important, but let's not make it difficult for others to be able to grow. Nobody wants to take advantage. I mean, the intention is not to take advantage of others, right? But also the intention is not to make South Africa unattractive. So Yasmin basically says many tend to raise funds from outside South Africa only, to then be limited on procuring businesses due to the triple BEE requirements that are not being met. It's a very valid point. And also it's a threshold thing, Yasmin, because the reality is, as a local South African entrepreneur, once, you know, you're turning over more than 10 million rands per annum, you now considered a qualifying small enterprise. 10 million rands, you just like literally starting to wash your face as a startup, right? You're not at the league of the 50 million, 100 million rand turnover businesses. You still considered small, but now you have to comply to, you know, triple BEE. You have to look at the different elements of triple BEE as a Black founder, right? It's not like I'm a white founder trying to not want to comply to triple. As a Black founder, I have to spend on enterprise development, supply and enterprise development. I have to look at, you know, have considerations around, you know, my management structure. I have to spend money instead of focusing on my main business. So there is a lot to be done around how do you not scrape it and remove it, because it is essential and important as South Africa progresses, you know, and integrates everybody and is inclusive. However, let's refine it and let it make sense, not kind of say this, this, and this, and that. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. It's been quite an exciting conversation. It's definitely one of many. This is the beginning. You know, it's a great partnership that we're having with the UK SA Tech Hub around these conversations and unpacking some of the key components that we have been addressing. And thanking you all for making this time. Please, Dumi, I'm hoping that you have already put us on, you've already put the information around the www.startupact.co.za. That's where you will find us, the Startup Act, you know, hashtag on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We are there, and we're going to have more of these conversations because they're very, very important. So thanking you all for your time. Thanking my great panelists, you know, for their contribution, especially you, Graham. You know, it's like I asked, are you guys offering 2 visas for the price of 1? Because you are, in essence, creating a world-class environment that everybody wants to be in the UK. Even though the sun doesn't shine every day, it's raining all the time. So how does South Africa become you know, the glorious country that it is, because it is already glorious. I want to end it at that. And to do the vote of thanks, I'm going to call Tracy. Tracy is from the UK SA Tech Hub, and she's going to do the vote of thanks and the closing.
Thanks so much, Matsi. Yeah, just a bit of context. I'm Tracy from the UK South Africa Tech Hub. So we are a UK initiative in South Africa looking at the tech entrepreneur ecosystem and how we can support and grow the space. So we work with different initiatives like the Startup Act on what we can do to really help entrepreneurs in the space and mature it. And I just want to take a moment just to thank all the panelists for coming together, for sharing your struggles, your insights, and recommendations of things that we can really consider and hopefully use within the startup movement as insights and learnings to go forward and hopefully make South Africa a more viable option for companies to come to. I also just want to mention that we are doing another webinar at the end of the month. That one is actually looking at Pan-Africa different startup acts. So speaking on the Tunisia one that's mentioned in the group, also reached out to colleagues who do the same program that we deliver in South Africa in Kenya and Nigeria. They put forward experts in their countries. And so really look at different countries and the policy work that's currently happening there and have a Pan-Africa discussion on what's happening in Africa and how can we learn from each other. And then lastly, I just want to thank Matsi for hosting today and the whole SiMODiSA team for putting this together. Really appreciate you guys and excited to see where this discussion leads to. Thanks so much. Thank you all.
Cheers,
Been a
everybody.
great
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for having us.
Mhm.